Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of our boxing hangouts. And on this one, we are concentrating exclusively on the great fights coming up and some of the activities involving all the great boxers and boxing matches in the United Kingdom. Of course, I just came back from the United Kingdom where I did several fights for Channel 5, one of which was one of the potential fights of the year, interestingly. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to get to all the big names in UK boxing. And we hope a lot of you are watching from the UK now, and we're going to have fun digging into what is, in my opinion, one of the great spots for boxing in all the world. Helping us do that, the man who produces the Boxing Hangouts and makes it all possible, Dan Parks. Dan, how are you?
I am excellent, Al. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you getting here. We're a little bit earlier than we normally broadcast, but we wanted to come in at a prime time for everybody in London. Specifically, we have so many British fans that have been a big supporter of the show and have been very active on all of our social media links. And I just did want to mention, if you have any questions, for those of you who are watching live, for Al or for Kevin, what you want to do is use the hashtag BB Hangouts, BB Hangout, BB Hangout, no plural. And we will be answering questions. Also, if you're on YouTube or on Google Plus watching us, you can ask questions right there on the site. And I'm excited for this this show. This is going to be another great one, Al.
We should have a lot of fun. And you mentioned Kevin, meaning being Kevin Iole, who is the boxing writer for Yahoo Sports. Arguably the most read boxing writer in the world, one of the best, which is part of the reason why he's the most read. Kevin, thank you so much. I'm going to tell the world that you came here to do this for us, even as you were on vacation. So I don't know what to say about this. I'm
off the golf course, into the hangout to talk to boxing with you, Al.
Well, you're very kind, and just make sure your wife, who is a lovely woman, doesn't hate me for taking you for a half hour on your vacation. Because I know she's on vacation too.
Half hour she's happy.
All right. Half hour we're okay for. Kevin, as you know, we kind of decided to do a special show here where we're digging into all things British in boxing. And first, a general statement, and I want to see how you feel about this. You know, you and I have been covering boxing for a long time, and there was a time on this side of the pond where people didn't give, I think, boxing in the UK its just due. And part of the reason was probably because just the geographical gulf, and there weren't quite as many champions, British champions worldwide as there might have been. But now I think it's generally acknowledged everywhere that in general, UK boxing is at an extraordinarily high level.
Yeah, you know, I think, Al, that what happened, say, like in the 70s and the 80s, you know, there wasn't the kind of training, you know, guys didn't train together, so you had a lot of the British guys all trained under the British trainers in Britain and didn't go to work and see the different styles, and conversely the guys over here didn't go anywhere else. And I think now you see, you know, this kind of commingling of thoughts and ideas, and trainers go both places, fighters go both places, and I think what happens is it makes the sport better. You know, the trainers are getting better, the fighters are getting better, and I think that, you know, you're certainly seeing that from a UK standpoint. I mean, you know, Joe Calzaghe going to be going into the Hall of Fame. I mean, what better example? A guy, you know, we talk about Floyd Mayweather being 46-0. Hey, let's not forget Joe Calzaghe was 46-0. And so I just think that that's part of it. You know, the fact that you know, the world's a smaller place than it used to be. It's easier to get from point A to point B. And I think that, you know, now we're seeing, you know, the British fighters are coming over here and working with some of our trainers, and some of our trainers are going over there and working with their fighters and trainers, and I think it's making a big difference.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's funny, I was just over when I was in England, Eddie Chambers fought on one of the cards. He's not training with Peter Fury. So it's interesting, like you say, it's cross-pollination back and forth. Now, there is a match coming up that is garnering just worldwide attention, and I think has enough of a buzz here in the United States that you can certainly say it's creating a buzz here. And more importantly, forget the United States, it is monstrous in the UK. Close to 80,000 people will be in Wembley Stadium to see Carl Froch and George Grove in the rematch of what was not only a very stirring fight, one of the great fights that we've seen in the last several years, but a very controversial ending. Let's go backwards first before we move to this fight. What camp are you in terms of the stoppage of that fight?
I think it was a very
bad camp.
I think it was a very bad stoppage myself. I think that I have all the respect in the world for Carl Froch. I praise Carl up and down, but I think he got a gift on this one. And I just don't like the way that fight was stopped. And I think it was almost as if, hey, let's look for a way to make sure Carl gets a break here. And, that's not the way officiating is supposed to be done. I thought it was premature. Groves, and I am a major safety advocate, Al, and I am almost always in the minority when, people are saying it was stopped too late, and I'm like, no, I want to see the fight stopped earlier as opposed to later. But in this case, I thought it was way too early. So, I buy George Groves' argument, and I think, he had a good point there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Howard Foster, jumping in so quickly. Now, it's possible that Carl Froch would have knocked him out in the next 40 seconds. It's possible he might have done it in the next round, or it's possible Groves would have gotten back in the fray and then gotten back to the boxing. And on top of that, Groves was winning the fight. So you look at all that, and I agree with you, the stoppage was premature. Of course, as great a fight as that is, a rematch, which would have been likely anyway, wouldn't have been as big without the controversy. Yeah, now we're headed to Wembley Stadium where we'll put all these people in Wembley Stadium, they will, for the fight. I find this a very difficult fight to preview, certainly to handicap, because of all of what happened in it. Trying to figure out which part was the real fight. Was the real fight when George was really controlling everything and even hurting Froch? Or was the real fight when Froch finally got his big punches in and hurt Grove?
Al, when I look at the first fight, and, I think you also have to take where the guys are coming from. And I said earlier, I'm a big Carl Froch fan. I mean, there's, I don't think there's many more guys in the world that have done what Carl Froch has done.
I agree, 100%.
Guys that he has fought, and most of whom he's beaten. He got drummed by Andre Ward, but you go outside of Andre Ward, and it's just consistently fight after fight after fight. Carl Froch is fighting top guys, and he's coming out on top. So I favor Froch coming into this. I don't think he's too old. I don't think it's at a point where he's on the downslide and Groves caught him at the right time. I think Groves wasn't as big a name going into the fight, especially worldwide. I think Carl looked and said, this isn't Andre Ward, this isn't, Lucien Boutte, or, whoever else you might want to mention of all the great fighters that Carl Froch has fought. And I think, mentally he just wasn't up to the same level that he was at. In Groves, he found out as an extremely good fighter, better than I think he gave him credit for. And it's, it's tough on fight night when you realize the guy's better than you thought to pick your game up that much. There's very few guys who can do that. That's one of the reasons I think Floyd Mayweather is so good, is because he never lets himself have that letdown. And I think Carl had a little bit of a letdown because he didn't perceive Groves being on the same level as some of these other guys he fought. I think now he knows. He's been in there. He knows this guy is legitimate. This guy's a good fighter. And I think we're going to see the Carl Froch who went on this tear beating the best guys all around the world. Yeah,
Carl Froch has probably fought the toughest schedule in the last 4 or 5 years of any fighter in the world, correct?
I think, I'm trying to think who I would say would be.
Abner Mares for a while there, but really not on that level.
Yeah, there's not many guys that were even close to that. And I mean, time after time after time, he's done it. And, to me, that's what we want to see in a boxer. We want to see a guy go out there and challenge himself against the best. Carl Froch says, I'm the best, and he's willing to fight you to prove it.
We'll see what happens. It'll be a fascinating rematch, and certainly George feels that he can get the job done in a rematch, and he'll have to box very effectively, to do it. I think the one thing we can say is probably whoever the next referee is, they won't stop this fight prematurely.
I think that they'll be cognizant of that, because getting from that ring through that crowd, if it's an early stoppage, is going to be pretty tough.
Yeah, it will be. So that should be a great fight. Now, on the undercard, James DeGale, who fought George Groves and had lost a very close decision with him, an Olympic champion. I've done a number of his fights when I've done TV over in the UK. He's a very, very good fighter who they thought was going to get a shot against Saki Obika. That didn't work out. He switched promoters from Hennessy over to matchroom boxing with Hearn, and he's now fighting Brandon Gonzalez on the undercard. A good fight.
I think Brandon Gonzalez is a guy that you got to watch for. I think you know he comes out of Andre Ward's camp. You know, he's got a lot of good attributes. I'm trying to blank on the South African kid's name that he fought, Thomas Deucehazen, and had a good performance there. I really like him as a fighter. I think he's got a lot going for him, and I think he's going to make for a good fight.
He might be the toughest person DeGale has fought, well, other than Groves. But and James DeGale, a very, very, very good, solid left-hand fighter who has great speed, hand speed, not murderous power, but he's a really good fighter. And so he'll get a big test, and then presumably he may get the winner of this 168-pound fight, the main event. So that should be an exciting night. Now we look down the road a little further in British boxing, and we find Tyson Fury taking on Derek Chisora, a rematch of a fight that I did several years ago. I broadcast announced it on Channel 5, in which Tyson Fury beat Derek Chisora. They're doing it again, and they're doing it again because the winner will be a mandatory for a world title shot. I don't know if they would be doing this fight again if it wasn't, or if they couldn't sell that fact. Chisora was dreadfully out of shape when he fought Fury the first time, but that's on him.
That's his fault.
So you can't say that's why Fury beat him. But will we see a better Derek Chisora this time around?
I think you have to think you are, and I think Chisora is the better fighter. I've never bought into Tyson Fury as a top level guy, and at first I didn't buy Chisora either. But then as I saw Chisora fight a few fights, he kind of convinced me that maybe he's not a Klitschko, but who is? But he's a pretty good, solid heavyweight. And I was surprised, quite frankly, by what happened in their first fight. I would like Chisora to make a comeback in this fight and to see him perform better. Now, is it going to be enough to overcome what was a pretty big gap? I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving Tyson Fury enough credit. I look at his fight with Steve Cunningham, and all due respect to Steve, who I think is a terrific fighter, but he's a cruiserweight. He's not a heavyweight. He's not even a big cruiserweight, and he was giving Tyson some trouble. So, I think that Derek Chisora is a legitimate heavyweight. I hate to say it, but I kind of think that Derek Chisora is going to step his game up in this one. I like Derek to win. I don't know about you.
Well, it's interesting. I am among a number of people. I tend to give Tyson Fury more credit for what he is able to do. He does have flaws. There's no question about that. And the Cunningham fight was a red flag because you shouldn't really be hurt by a cruiserweight who, as you point out, isn't that big a cruiserweight for him to be stepping up to heavyweight. Tyson Fury goes down in almost all his fights. Ironically, didn't go down against Chisora and was almost never in trouble, which was odd because even against opponents like Nikolai Furta and people of that nature, Fury has been rocked. But he always gets up, and I believe when he's in shape, when he's really in shape, I think Fury is capable of fighting tall and using the jab, and he's got power in his punches. I would, if you put a gun to my head, I might reverse your pick and go with Fury, but I do recognize that Derek Chisora is a very good fighter, and when he's motivated and ready to go, I think he's a handful. So,
well, let me just say one other thing to that point, because I think this is something about Derek Chisora that we have. Derek Chisora mentally, you never know what Derek Chisora you're going to get, and what kind of game he's going to come with. I think we know what Tyson's going to bring. Tyson's going to be ready to fight.
Right.
Going to fight his style of fight. But we don't know what we're going to get from Chisora. That I think is going to be the big question in the fight.
It's an interesting fight. You can go either way on it. You really can. And that one's going to be, I think, at the MEN Arena, and should be a big fight in a heavyweight division that is starting to really kind of generate a little interest again, which it hasn't in the past. Speaking of heavyweights generating interest, so I was on the Claire Balding show on BT Sports in England, which is a very, very enjoyable talk show that they have, and David Haye was on the show with me, and we were talking about the idea of whether he would come back or not come back. He's had those series of injuries and he had surgery. And he said he will know in about a month or two whether it's feasible for him to come back, whether this injury is one that would be re-injured or whatever. Is that something that's good for the heavyweight division? David Haye has his share of detractors on both sides of the pond, but at the end of the day, he wins most of his fights, virtually all, and he is certainly a flamboyant presence.
I'm going to tell you one person who is not a detractor of David Haye, and that's me.
Oh, there you go.
I think David Haye is an outstanding fighter, and I think a lot of people were making a lot of the Klitschko fight, and I get it when you talk big like Haye did before that fight, and then all of a sudden you perform as poorly as he did in the fight. I think you suck it up afterwards and don't make an excuse and say, oh, I hurt my foot, I did this, I did that. But, let's first of all remember it's Vladimir Klitschko, and I don't care what anybody says, one of the great heavyweights of all time. Absolutely. Look at this guy has done. And you're getting beat, by Vladimir Klitschko is not getting beat by Derek Chisora or Tyson Fury or anybody else. You're getting beat by an all-time great. And I just think David Haye has a lot of talent, and I think he brings a lot to the heavyweight division. I think the division is much more interesting when he's in. He's a knockout puncher, even in heavyweight. I think he's got good power in his hands. He makes the fights interesting, with his talking, and I think he's got a lot of good skills. I mean, you don't win the undisputed cruiserweight title like he did if you're not a skilled boxer. I really like David Haye. I hope he can come back. I hope he can be healthy for a good period of time so we can see him, because I think that would really generate some interest in the heavyweight division on both sides.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens. My inclination, if I just had to tell you sitting there next to him, my feeling is he wants to do it. And, of course, everyone was disappointed when his fight with Fury fell out. That would have been a really fun event, and every ticket was sold to that. So,
yeah, love to see that.
Dan, do we have any questions you want to have tossed in there from anybody?
One of the questions who just came in, they want to know how come Andre Ward is not, with 80,000 people showing up at Wembley, how come Andre Ward hasn't been fighting over in England?
Well, that's an easy one.
Yeah, he hasn't been fighting anywhere because of his contractual disputes with his promoter, Danny Goosen. And Kevin, you're on top of stories like this. For British fans and everybody else, when do we expect to see Andre Ward back in the ring?
I think it's going to be several months still, Al. I think it's going to be a while to get him back. Just to give a brief overview, if I might. Basically what happened, first of all, he went to arbitration in California on 2 separate occasions claiming his contract was invalid. And he went in front of the California State Athletic Commission. He alleged that different provisions of his contract were invalid, violated California Athletic Commission rules, and he should become a free agent. In both cases, Dan Goosen won those cases. Yep. So that now it's going to court. So Andre Ward has filed a lawsuit against Dan Goosen alleging a certain number of things, but basically saying, he hasn't performed, he hasn't gotten him fights when he's been available, and he hasn't performed at the level so that Andre Ward could maximize his talent. So Ward's feeling is, I'm better off sitting out and getting away from Goosen and getting to a promoter that will be able to put me in big fights and then put me on Showtime or HBO and have me in mega fight. I think he's looking at Top Rank. It can only be Top Rank, to be honest with you, because if you're looking at GoldenBoy, they're doing Showtime, and Andre, who used to be with Showtime, is now an announcer for HBO over here in the United States, and he's under a contract. It's not the same kind of contract they used to have, but it's still a pretty solid contract. He's one of HBO's top guys. So I think really the only way he can go is either sign with Top Rank or kind of operate independently the way Miguel Cotto is doing. But I think it's going to be a number of months. Both sides are entrenched, and we're going to end up in court. And I think it'll take at least the start of the trial before maybe the sides get together and get a settlement.
Well, that's too bad, because Andre Ward had an injury, now this situation keeping him out of action, and it has an impact on the UK because there's so many good 168-pounders over there. Now, one of the fighters who we thought was going to fight in the United States, Amir Khan did fight, as a matter of fact, against Luis Collazo in his last on the undercard of Mayweather-Maidana. We saw an Amir Khan that fought very well against Collazo, and before the fight, everyone was saying how solid Collazo is, and he's never had a bad outing against a good fighter. And then some people did some revisionist history after it when Khan fought very well, which happens in boxing all the time. I thought that was a fairly impressive win by Amir Khan.
Al, so did I, and I've been, on the opposite side of Amir Khan and criticizing Amir and not thinking he fought well, and I've been the first one to say, hey, Amir Khan is more hype than, but, he performed tremendously. I picked Collazo to win that fight, and I know what a good fight Louis Collazo is. He is a tremendous fighter, and if you're not ready to fight, he's going to give you trouble. I don't care who you are. And I thought, Amir did well. I felt really bad because as I was praising him, I'm hearing a lot of the fans saying, oh, he's holding and grabbing, and he's not. I mean, I thought he was the epitome of a boxer puncher that night. When he had opportunities to throw his right hand and set things up, he did. I thought he moved very well, controlled the ring. He showed a really good jab. He wasn't getting hit himself all that much. I thought he fought a very smart fight against a very crafty, difficult guy to fight.
Now, he will likely, here's the situation now with the Mayweather, of course, Amir Khan will be observing Ramadan, and that will not allow him to fight as early as September. And so as a result of that, if the Mayweather people are determined to fight in September, on September 13th, as they want, they may be forced to go with Marcos Maidana. Do we see Amir Khan taking an interim fight if that happens and trying to win a title?
Here's a surprise. I think you might see Amir Khan get into the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes in Macau in November.
Ooh, that's interesting.
It depends on how, I think we now say the split of GoldenBoy is going to be inevitable, and we're going to have Oscar De La Hoya and GoldenBoy go this way and Richard Schaefer go a different way. Okay. At some point that I think that is going to happen. Once that does occur, if Amir Khan is on the GoldenBoy end of it, and that means if he signed to a promotional agreement to GoldenBoy, then I think you're going to see him become a factor for Pacquiao. Bob Arum has already said that that's a fight that he would like for Manny. He's offered the fight to Marquez, but certainly Marquez wants mega money, and I'm hearing he wants a guarantee in the range of $20 million to fight Pacquiao over in Macau. And if that's accurate, that's going to be really hard to pay him $20 million and Pacquiao that kind of money. I think that brings Amir Khan into the picture because certainly there's no real logical opponent for Pacquiao in the top rank sphere other than Marquez, and a lot of people would say, we don't even want to see Marquez. He's already fought 4 times. We don't need to see the 5th fight. So I think Amir Khan's got a lot of options, and the fact that he's not fighting Mayweather in September will open him up to a potential fight in November against Manny Pacquiao, and then potentially down the road a fight next year against Mayweather.
Wow, that is fascinating. And of course, for fans that, especially a lot of them are watching over in the UK, they're kind of aware of the whole GoldenBoy situation. But do you think, not to veer off our discussion pattern, do you think that schism between in GoldenBoy is going to actually play itself out as soon as the next couple of months?
I do. I think it's going to play itself out in the next month or 6 weeks. I really do. I think they're getting to the point where they realize the business of the company can't go forward and the fighters themselves if something doesn't happen. So I think that, is by the time the Canelo fight comes around with Erislandy Lara on July 12th, I think that might be a good point to think it's going to be decided at that stage which way they go. And if Richard decides to stay and Oscar and Richard make up, so to speak, which I'm not necessarily expecting to happen, but if they do, then that'll affect it certainly one way. But I think if Richard goes his own way and Oscar goes his way and stays with GoldenBoy, then I think that totally changes the dynamic of what's going on. And I think at that point, immediately you see GoldenBoy fighters fighting top-ranked fighters immediately. That'll start happening. You'll see those fights being made, and it will depend on which camp Amir Khan gets put into. What we don't know right now, because I broke the story a couple of weeks ago, Richard Schaefer admitted he signed a lot of fighters and had them fight on GoldenBoy cards, but they weren't signed to GoldenBoy contracts. They were signed to managerial contracts with Al Heyman.
Right.
Used and put on shows. Now, we don't know. Some of the fighters are signed to GoldenBoy. Some are just signed to Al Heyman agreements. The interesting thing is we don't know where Amir Khan fits in that. If Amir Khan is signed to a GoldenBoy promotional agreement, and I have to think that he is, because he's a pretty valuable asset, and he signed with GoldenBoy prior to the dispute between Oscar and Richard. I think, Al, that puts him on the GoldenBoy side of the equation, and that makes it more likely that we would see Amir Khan become a factor for Pacquiao in November.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, we'll see how it plays itself out. A fighter who has fought in great fights from Great Britain, I was privileged to do his fight against Costa Zoo, is the great Ricky Hatton. And Ricky, who is now, of course, training and promoting recently at an event in which he at the NEC in Birmingham, where as many as 55,000 people may have shown up to get these sessions, special sessions, training sessions there, demonstrating the power of Ricky Hatton still as a public figure in the UK. It is fascinating. I believe that fans there will always love him. And I was at the Sinchenko fight. I did his final fight for the United States on Showtime, of his fight with Vyacheslav Sinchenko, where he was winning the fight and lost at the end by a body shot just a round or two before it ended. And the outpouring of love for him never ends in the UK, does it?
I don't think the outpouring of love for Ricky ends anywhere. You know, he's not loved in the United States, or the UK, or anywhere else, but he's loved around the world because that's the kind of guy he is. And, you know, Ricky was, you know, he had everything you wanted. He had the everyman quality. You know, you could sit down and have a beer with him and laugh and talk and joke, and he was just a normal guy. You know, you could watch him fight. And, you know, he wasn't a boxer. He was a guy that got in there and fought. And he was concerned about giving the fans a good show. And if he won a fight and he didn't feel it was a good show, he was disappointed. He was one of those guys that everybody just liked, and you had a hard time not rooting for Ricky Hatton. And, you know, he was in one of the most memorable fights I ever saw just because of the emotion that the crowd showed for him when he fought Mayweather. I mean, I'll never, ever, ever forget that. And I've covered some really huge fights with really big emotional crowds, but that day, you know, there's only one Ricky Hatton, and it was just incredible the way they embraced him, and I think that's part of the story.
That's great. Kevin, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being with us. Kevin you can see all his work at Yahoo Sports, at Kevin Iole.
At Kevin I.
Pardon?
Kevin I.
Kevin I, I'm sorry. See, I'm so bad. At Kevin I on Twitter.
Well, you have me bookmark your follow me, so you have me. You don't need to.
I have you. See, I just click and I get to you. So at Kevin I, and he's a great follow. He's a great read. And as you can tell, he has not only the best information in boxing, but one of the best opinions about anything. And thank you for joining us on this special edition in which we talked exclusively about boxing in the UK.
I love it, Al. Thank you for having me on. I'd like the chance to talk to the British fans because I know how passionate they are. So thank you so much.
Yeah, they're among the best boxing fans, if not the best boxing fans in the world. Thank you, Kevin. Well, Dan, we're going to be our future in the Hangouts is a good one because we've got a couple of interesting things coming up. One of the best things is we're going to be, you and I, at the Boxing Hall of Fame, which I realize we did not discuss with Kevin, but I'll mention it real briefly here, that Joe Calzaghe, who is one of the greatest fighters, well, although Kevin did mention him earlier in the show and point out that how deserving he was at 46-0, Joe Calzaghe will be one of the folks inducted on the Hall of Fame on the June 7th weekend, and we're going to be there, and we're going to do something I think kind of unique, Dan. We're going to look at the Hall of Fame from our viewpoint, my viewpoint, and it's going to be like my personal tour of that weekend.
Exactly. And, you know, it was funny because when we started talking about doing this whole weekend, you know, I was there with you when you were inducted. It was all a blur for you because you literally went from one place to the next, and all the fans and all of the ceremony. And you know, I got a chance to enjoy I think the Hall of Fame a lot more than you did during that weekend.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a chance. This is going to be a chance for you to really enjoy the Hall of Fame to its extreme. And more importantly, we're going to document the whole thing for everybody so that they're going to get a chance to see the Hall of Fame through your eyes.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And as you say, for me, I feel like it's a chance to enjoy Oscar De La Hoya being enshrined, also Tito Trinidad, a great group of fighters. And I mentioned Joe Calzaghe, who I wrote, interestingly, in the booklet for the Hall of Fame, their program, they asked me to write the story on him, and I did. I have great admiration, and I did a couple of his biggest fights, including his win over Jeff Lacey in Manchester, which was spectacular.
Well, and we're hoping to be able to interview as many of all the inductees while we're there. We actually have, the Hall of Fame has provided us with a beautiful booth, which is going to be right there on the grounds. We have several different sessions where we're going to be out there interviewing people. So for all of our Boxing Hangout subscribers, it's important to stay close during the Boxing Hangout weekend, during that whole Hall of Fame weekend, because we're going to be just popping up with Hangouts, and it could be at any moment. And one moment you're going to be with it could be with one of the great fans. It could be one of the great boxers. You won't have any idea, but we're going to be there all weekend documenting, and it's going to be a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, it really is kind of like being there. We're going to make it as much like being there as is humanly possible for everybody. And that's what our goal is, because everyone can't go to this event. And if you're a big boxing fan and you want to experience it, stay with us, on our YouTube and our Google Plus and everywhere we have access to you, because it's going to be a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then we will be back with another Hangout. Tell everybody that with Jay Tunney, which is going to be terrific, as we talk about a book he wrote about the great Gene Tunney and his relationship with George Bernard Shaw. Amazing
stories here, and I consider myself a bit of a boxing fan and a kind of a connoisseur of knowing. I like to think that I know a lot of these things about a lot of these stories, and I didn't know half of the stories that came out in this story about Gene Tunney. And wow, so many elements to the Dempsey fight that I had no clue about. I didn't really understand the personality about Gene Tunney at all, nor did I know there's actually quite a love story, a very romantic story there with how he met his wife and how they traveled all around Europe, and the interactions with him, and not only with George Bernard Shaw, but also with Hemingway and with a ton of the greatest names of that whole period, Charlie Chaplin and Wells and Hemingway, and he interacted with all of these people on a very interesting level. And the book is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. And to get a chance to actually have Gene's son here with us is a really wonderful opportunity, I think.
Yeah, it's spectacular. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Be ready for that one. And our next visit with all of you will be when we're at the Hall of Fame. For those of you across the pond watching in England and here in the United States as well, we're looking forward to it. So Dan, we'll have fun then. And my thanks to Dan for all his great work here on this Boxing Hangout. And thanks to all of you for tuning in today. And we'll see you again on the Hall of Fame weekend.